For my sister's birthday, they flew her to Paris, threw a gala, and gave her a $6,500 watch. For mine, a half-eaten cake from the fridge and a text that said, "We totally forgot. Happy late birthday." I didn't yell. I just got up, took my spare key off the hook, and walked out. That night, while they toasted her on Instagram, I turned off my phone, booked a one-way flight, and waited for the screaming to start. I, 29M, have always been good at swallowing things. Not food, but feelings. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone and makes it hard to breathe, but you smile anyway, because that's what you do when you're the spare child. The one who doesn't quite fit the narrative your parents wrote before you were born. My sister turned 26 3 months before my birthday. I watched from my apartment as Mom posted photo after photo on Instagram. The Eiffel Tower at sunset. A private dinner at some Michelin-starred restaurant I couldn't pronounce. A black tie gala where she wore a dress that probably cost more than my car. And then the finale. A rose gold watch with diamonds studded around the face, presented in a velvet box while Dad teared up and told her she was his princess, his pride, his everything. $6,500. I knew because Mom had shown me the receipt 2 weeks earlier when I stopped by for dinner, asking if I thought it was too much. I had smiled and said it was perfect, that she would love it, and Mom had squeezed my hand and told me I was such a good brother. I didn't mention that my birthday was coming up. I never did anymore. It seemed pointless. The day I turned 29 started like any other. I woke up at 6, went for a run, showered, and headed to work. My phone was quiet. No calls, no texts, no flood of social media notifications. I told myself I didn't care. I had stopped caring years ago, somewhere between the birthday they forgot when I turned 19 and the one where they showed up 3 hours late with gas station flowers when I turned 23. Work dragged on. I sat in my cubicle, processing spreadsheets and pretending the knot in my stomach was hunger and not the childish hope that maybe this year would be different. At lunch, I checked my phone. Nothing. I bought myself a sandwich from the deli downstairs and ate it alone, scrolling through my sister's Instagram stories. She had posted a throwback from Paris, captioned with hearts and gratitude. By 5 o'clock, I had accepted the reality. They had forgotten again. It shouldn't have hurt anymore, but it did, like pressing on a bruise that never quite healed. I drove home in silence, parked in my building's garage, and climbed the stairs to my apartment. I unlocked the door and stood in the entryway for a moment, looking at the empty space I called home. My phone buzzed at 7:43 in the evening. A text from Mom. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The message was short, almost casual. They had totally forgotten. Happy late birthday. There was a cake emoji at the end, like that somehow made it better. I sat down on my couch and read it 3 more times, waiting for something to break inside me. Anger, maybe, or sadness. But what came instead was clarity, cold and sharp as winter air. I texted back a single thumbs-up emoji and set my phone face down on the coffee table. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out. The drive to their house took 20 minutes. I had a spare key, the same one they had given me years ago for emergencies. I let myself in through the front door and heard voices coming from the kitchen. Laughter, the clinking of glasses. I walked down the hallway and found them at the dining table. Mom, Dad, my sister, her fiancé. There was wine, fancy cheese, and in the center of the table, a cake. My cake. I recognized it immediately because I had bought it myself 2 weeks ago and left it in their fridge after a family dinner. It was half-eaten now, one side carved away with a knife that left jagged edges in the frosting. My sister saw me first. She smiled and waved, told me to come join them. Dad looked up and asked what brought me by. Mom said something about how they were just having a little celebration. Wasn't that nice? Nobody mentioned my birthday. I walked to the key hook by the back door where I had hung my spare key for the last 8 years. I took it off slowly, feeling the weight of the brass in my palm. Then I turned around and looked at them. Really looked at them. Maybe for the first time in years. I told them I just wanted to return this. Mom asked why, her face creasing with confusion. I said I wouldn't be needing it anymore. My sister laughed and asked if I was being dramatic. Her fiancé smirked into his wine glass. Dad stood up and asked what this was about, his voice taking on that edge of authority he always used when he thought I was being unreasonable. I placed the key on the counter and told them calmly that I was done. Mom asked what I meant. I said exactly what it sounded like. My sister rolled her eyes and said I was overreacting. She reminded me that birthdays weren't a big deal, that I was being childish. I looked at her, at the rose gold watch glinting on her wrist, and asked her to repeat that. She faltered. Dad told me to stop being disrespectful. Mom reached for my arm and said they had just been busy, that things slipped through the cracks sometimes, that I knew they loved me. I pulled away gently and told her that love wasn't supposed to feel like an afterthought. I left before anyone could respond. I walked out of that house and got into my car and drove home with my hands steady on the wheel. No tears, no shaking, just the strange lightness that comes from finally letting go of something you've been carrying too long. That night, while I sat in my apartment eating leftover Chinese food, my phone exploded. My sister posted on Instagram a family photo from earlier in the evening. The caption was something about gratitude and family and blessed beyond measure. The comments poured in, all hearts and emojis, and people telling her how lucky she was. I turned off my phone. Then I opened my laptop and booked a one-way flight to Seattle. I had always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest, had always talked about it, but never gone because there was always some family obligation or expectation tethering me to this city. The flight left in 2 days. I requested time off work, citing a family emergency. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I spent the next day packing. Not everything, just what mattered. Clothes, my laptop, some books, the photo album my grandmother had given me before she died. I donated half my furniture to charity and put the rest in storage. I gave my landlord notice and paid the fee for breaking my lease early. It felt extravagant and reckless and absolutely necessary. My phone stayed off. I imagined the messages piling up, the concern morphing into irritation, morphing into anger. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, their feelings were not my responsibility. The morning of my flight, I turned my phone on long enough to post a single photo to Instagram. It was a picture of the sunrise from my apartment window. Nothing special, just light breaking through clouds. The caption was simple, starting over. Then I turned it off again, grabbed my suitcase, and left. Seattle was gray and cold and beautiful. I checked into a hostel downtown and spent the first week walking until my feet ached. I visited Pike Place Market, watched them throw fish, and bought coffee from a vendor who told me I looked like I needed a fresh start. I hiked through forests that smelled like rain and earth. I sat by the water and watched ferries cut through the fog. I also started looking for work. My degree was in finance, and my experience made me marketable enough. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 interviews lined up. Within a month, I had a job offer from a mid-sized firm with better pay than what I had been making back home. I signed the lease on a small apartment in Capitol Hill. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, a window that overlooked a street lined with cafes and bookstores. It was mine. Only mine. It took 6 weeks for them to find me. Not physically, but digitally. I had finally turned my phone back on, mostly because my new job required it. The messages came flooding in all at once, dozens of them spanning weeks. The first few from Mom were worried. She asked where I was, if I was okay, why I wasn't answering. Then they turned accusatory. She said I was being selfish, that I had scared them, that this wasn't funny anymore. Dad's messages were shorter, more direct. He told me to stop being ridiculous and come home. My sisters were the worst. She called me ungrateful, said I was throwing a tantrum over nothing, that I was embarrassing the family. There were voicemails too. I listened to one from Mom where she cried and said she didn't understand what she had done wrong. I deleted it halfway through. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I blocked their numbers and their social media accounts. It felt violent and final and exactly right. 3 months into my new life, I met someone at a coffee shop. We started talking about books and ended up spending 3 hours debating the merits of various authors. They asked for my number and I gave it to them, surprised by how easy it felt to let someone new in. We started seeing each other casually, then seriously. They asked about my family once and I told them the short version. We didn't talk anymore. They didn't push, just nodded and said that must have been hard. I appreciated them for that, for not trying to fix something they didn't understand. Work was good, better than good. I was promoted within 6 months, given my own team and projects that actually challenged me. My boss told me I had a future there if I wanted it. I did. I made friends, real ones who invited me to things and remembered my birthday and texted me random memes at 2 in the morning. I went to concerts and bars and dinner parties. I took a pottery class and was terrible at it, but kept going anyway because it made me laugh. I built a life. 8 months after I left, My phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was my aunt, my mom's sister. She said she had gotten my number from an old contact and hoped I didn't mind her calling. She told me that things had fallen apart back home. My sister's engagement had ended badly. Her fiancé had left her for someone else, and she was devastated. Mom and Dad were struggling too, arguing constantly about things that had nothing to do with my sister's breakup and everything to do with cracks that had always been there. My aunt said they talked about me sometimes, wondered where I was and if I was okay. She said Mom cried about it late at night when she thought no one could hear. She said Dad had started going to therapy. She asked if I would consider reaching out, maybe coming home for a visit. I thanked her for calling and told her I would think about it. Then I hung up and sat with the information for a long time. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. No vindication, no surge of righteousness. Just a dull ache, the kind that comes from watching something break that you used to love. But I also didn't feel guilty. That was new. I didn't call them. I didn't go back. Maybe that makes me cruel. Maybe it makes me a coward. I've stopped trying to decide which. Instead, I kept living. I celebrated my 30th birthday with friends who showed up on time and brought gifts they had actually put thought into. We went to a karaoke bar, and I sang badly and laughed until my stomach hurt. Someone made a toast about new beginnings, and everyone cheered. Later that night, I checked my phone and saw that my sister had posted something about family and forgiveness and growth. The comments were full of support. I wondered if she was talking about me or just performing for an audience that would never know the full story. I closed the app and put my phone away. A year and a half after I left, I got an email from Dad. It was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations that didn't quite explain anything. He said they had been wrong, that they hadn't seen it at the time, but they saw it now. He said they missed me. He said he was proud of me, even though he had no idea what I was doing with my life anymore. He asked if there was any way to fix this. I read it 3 times. Then I saved it to a folder and didn't respond. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll be ready to unpack all of it, to sit across from them and hear them out, and decide if forgiveness is something I have the capacity for. But not today. Not yet. For now, I'm here, in a city that doesn't know my history, surrounded by people who see me as I am and not as the leftover parts of someone else's story. I have a job I'm good at, friends who care, a partner who makes me laugh. I have a life I chose. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not the dramatic exit or the blocked numbers or the radio silence. But this, building something good out of the wreckage, proving to myself that I was never the problem. They gave my sister Paris and diamonds and declarations of love. They gave me scraps and excuses and a half-eaten cake. So I gave myself everything else. And I'm not sorry. Update 1. It has been 3 years since I walked out. 3 years since I turned off my phone and left everything behind. I need to write this down because something happened last week that I'm still processing. My grandmother died. Not the one who gave me the photo album. Her sister, my great-aunt technically, but we all called her Grandma. She was 94 and lived a full life, and her passing wasn't a shock. But it still hurt. I found out through a distant cousin who somehow had my email. She sent me the funeral details and said she understood if I didn't want to come, but thought I should know. I stared at that email for 2 days before deciding. I flew back for the funeral. Just for that, nothing else. I booked a hotel near the cemetery and planned to leave the same day. No detours, no confrontations. The service was small, held in the church where my great-aunt had been a member for 60 years. I arrived early and sat in the back, hoping to avoid notice. But the moment I walked in, I felt eyes on me. Relatives I hadn't seen in years, family friends, all of them staring like I was a ghost. Mom saw me first. She was standing near the front with Dad and my sister, accepting condolences from the people filing in. Her face went white, then red, then crumpled completely. She started toward me, but Dad caught her arm and held her back. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger exactly. Something sadder. My sister turned, and our eyes met across the room. She looked different. Thinner, tired, older in a way that had nothing to do with age. She didn't smile or wave or acknowledge me at all. Just looked away. I sat through the service in silence. The priest talked about grace and redemption and eternal rest. People shared memories of my great-aunt, stories about her kindness and humor and the way she could make anyone feel seen. I thought about the last time I had visited her, 2 months before I left, and how she had held my hand and told me I deserved to be happy. After the service, There was a reception at the church hall. I almost skipped it, but something pulled me inside. I stood by the coffee table and made small talk with cousins I barely remembered. And then Mom appeared in front of me. She asked if we could talk. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. I hesitated but nodded and followed her to a corner of the room where it was less crowded. She told me she had been wrong. She said it plainly, without excuses or justifications. She said they had taken me for granted, that they had been so focused on my sister that they forgot I needed them too. She said she was sorry. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to unload years of hurt and resentment, and tell her that sorry didn't fix anything. But standing there, looking at her face lined with grief and regret, I just felt tired. I told her I appreciated her saying that. She asked if I could ever forgive them. I said I didn't know. She nodded like she had expected that answer and told me she understood. Then she asked if I was happy now. I told her I was. She smiled, and it was real, and it hurt. Dad approached next. He shook my hand, formal and awkward, and told me it was good to see me. He asked about Seattle, about my job, about my life. I gave him the surface details, and he listened carefully, nodding along like he was trying to memorize everything. He said he was glad I was doing well. Then he said he was sorry too and walked away before I could respond. My sister never came over. She stayed on the other side of the room the entire time, surrounded by relatives who kept glancing between us like they were waiting for an explosion. Before I left, she caught my eye one last time. She didn't smile or wave, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Regret maybe, or resentment. Probably both. I left the reception early, drove back to my hotel, and caught my flight home that evening. I didn't exchange numbers with anyone. Didn't make promises to stay in touch. Just went back to the life I had built far away from all of them. I'm not sure what I expected from that day. Closure maybe, or some kind of dramatic resolution. But what I got was confirmation. Confirmation that I had made the right choice. That the distance wasn't cruelty, but survival. They're trying now. That's clear. But trying doesn't erase the years they didn't. And I don't owe them a second chance just because they finally realized what they lost. Maybe someday I'll feel differently. Maybe the anger will fade, and I'll want them back in my life in some capacity. But right now, I'm okay with where things stand. I have my life. They have theirs. And maybe that's enough.